Well, good morning. Actually, not good morning. Welcome to Tractor Safety Training for Employers. My name is Jeff Lutz, and I'm one of the safety directors, program director for the Washington Farm Bureau. This is only basic training. Employees need to have additional on-site training with specific equipment used in the workplace and specific hazards for the workplace. Each new operator should also be familiar with the contents of the operator's manual of each piece of equipment used. Have on-site practical training of the specific equipment, starting on a level work area and then advancing to more complex work areas. Employees should understand the specific hazards presented by the workplace, such as slopes, obstructions, ditches, areas of concern for safety. And they should have a driver's license if they'd be operating on the equipment on the public road. We get asked often, can my 16-year-old drive a tractor? Yes, if they're trained and they have a driver's license. Operators must be trained prior to his or her initial assignment and annually thereafter. So what are our objectives today? Objectives are to review some injury data, talk about employee training requirements, visit some hazard types and hazard points, and then prevention. So if you look at the data, tractors are one of the most hazardous pieces of equipment on the farm. From 2011 to 2018, there were 1,285 fatal occupational injuries involving a tractor nationally. Washington tends to have significant fewer amounts of tractor-involved fatalities than other states. But in that same time frame, Washington experienced 20 fatalities, which is still 20 too many. As you can see, with the trend line is very flat. With all of the technology advancements that we have, we still can't seem to reduce the number of tractor-related fatalities. Non-fatal injuries are a little more challenging to track because nationally, not all agricultural accidents are reported as occupational injuries. Although these numbers are likely underreported, it gives us a good idea of the types of injuries workers are experiencing when a tractor is involved. This chart includes all non-fatal tractor accidents reported to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2018, tractor incidences caused 700 cases of injuries. 140 of them were sprains, strains, or tears. 100 were fractures. 140 were bruises or contusions. 70 of them were multiple traumatic injuries. 200 were from with soreness or pain, and 30 were some other type of injury. These are all required days away from work. You can go to fatality assessment and control evaluation. These are reports that Department of Labor and Industries in the state of Washington puts forth. You can also see hazards associated with using tractors through CDC and NIOSH. Lots of fatality bulletins. SHARP is the governing arm of fatality assessment, control, and evaluation. Those are all places to go and get good information on case history of tractors and their associated hazards and fatalities. All tractor operators should be trained specifically on the operation of the tractor to be used. I grew up in agriculture in tree fruits, and I know how to use low profile tractors, but I'd have difficulties using a large row crop tractor. And therefore, if I'm working for you, I should be trained on that specific tractor. I should also be trained on the topographical features of the land where the tractor is going to be operated initially. Make sure that if the job task changes, that I'm retrained, and then retrain at least annually thereafter. One of the rule requirements are that employees receive annual tractor training. Employee operating instructions should include the following. It must include the following. Securely fasten your seatbelt if a tractor has a roller protective structure. ROPS are vitally important for low profile tractors. Larger tractors have, many of them have cabs, and those cabs are usually roller protective structures as well. And operators should be wearing a seatbelt when they're in a tractor that has ROPS. Those ROPS are up on a low profile tractor because you can remove them, you can lower them down. When the ROPS are down, no seatbelt. When the ROPS are up, they should wear a seatbelt. We'll talk about the safety zone here in just a minute. Where possible, avoid operating those tractors near ditches, embankments, and holes. Stay off of slopes that are too steep for safe operations. reduce speed when turning and crossing slopes and on rough, slick, or muddy surfaces. These are all things that employees should be aware of. Watch where we're going, especially at row ends and around trees. Passengers should not be on tractors that only have one seat. Some larger tractors have a buddy seat that you can ride in. That buddy seat is provided for instruction, and it must have a seat belt as well. Operate the tractor smoothly, no jerks, no turns, quick turns, no quick starts or stops. Explain to employees that they should hitch only to the drawbar and the hitch points that are recommended by the tractor manufacturers. Where do you find that? In the operator's manual. When tractor stopped, set the brakes securely and use the park or lock mechanism if available. Make sure the implements are lowered. To prevent such hazards on operations of tractors, let's discuss some important SOPs, some safe operating practices. And in addition to this training, you should be familiar with the contents of the operator's manual and the equipment that you're operating for its specific workplace limits, tolerances, and hazards. So if you put an implement onto a tractor, which is what we use them for, then you should have the operator's manual of the tractor, and you should have the operator's manual of the piece of equipment, the implement that's on it as well. Once adequately trained on the specific equipment prior to operating the tractor and the equipment, you should always walk around the tractor, checking it for any deficiencies or malfunctions. If you're flying airplanes, the pilot checks all the systems before they fly. Why? Because they fall out of the sky if you don't. So let's make sure that we walk around tractors, checking for deficiencies and malfunctions. Check for guards, check for shields, including the master shield on the back of the tractor where the PTO shaft extends. Make sure that all PTO shaft guards are in place, and any guarding on the implements like the chain drives and sprockets. If employees should be trained that if there are deficiencies in guarding, they shouldn't operate that equipment until the guards are assessed and applied proper guards on the equipment. Let's review the workplace area before they go out, assess it, look for slopes, dips, or uneven work areas and obstructions. Remind employees that they should use handrails and handholds when they're mounting the equipment, and always face the equipment and use 3 points of contact. Adjust the seat to easily reach the controls, then put the seatbelt on, then only start the tractor while sitting in the operator's seat. So let's go over that again real quick. Check for guards, walk around it, make sure everything's in place. Assess the work area, talk about where you're going, what the work is going to be done. Use handrails and handholds, large tractors, small tractors, and all in between. Adjust the seat to reach the controls. Put the seatbelt on, and don't start the tractor unless you're sitting in the operator's seat. So how do injuries occur on rollovers? Well, the 5 most common types of tractor accidents are rollovers, both sideway and rearward. And those rollovers can be fatal. Rear rollovers can happen when the rear wheels can't rotate to move the tractor forward and the front end rises up. It's typically caused by the tractor getting stuck, some device preventing the wheels from turning, climbing a hill that's too steep, the clutch being released too quickly in a low gear with the engine running at a high speed, or a load that's hitched above the drawbar and above the center of gravity. Sideway rollovers are typically caused by operating the tractor on a hillside that's too steep, with the front end loader or the implement is too high for a given load, and it's on a hill that raises the center of gravity, and then a turn is made, and the center of gravity being as high as it is with implements and loaders up in the air causes them to overturn sideways. Also operating the tractor too close to the edge of a road or a ditch with a slope. Let's talk about PTO entanglements. When we want to be careful that we train employees to make sure they know that PTO shaft is rotating 9 to 15 rotations per second, and anyone who comes close to the rear of the tractor is in danger. Crushing injuries can happen from hitching equipment. It can happen in the blink of an eye. The equipment's heavy, it's awkward. There's often many, many pinch points. Another one is falls from ladders. The only safe place to sit on a tractor is in the driver's seat. An unexpected bump or quick turn can easily throw a rider. an extra rider from a tractor. That's why it only has one seat. Use the ROPS, use the seat belt. And those usually result in some pretty serious injuries. Jumping from a tractor can be dangerous, even when it's not an operation. Muddy boots or loose clothing can cause the jump to go wrong and lead to injury. And lastly, we operate these vehicles out on the road at times. Collisions between tractors and equipment or tractors and motor vehicles while on public roads is a real issue. Make sure that if you're on the public road that you've got flashers, you got a slow moving emblem, vehicle emblem. Make sure that you might need a pilot car, have them go along with you. Implements can cause exposure to a variety of serious hazards. Ingoing pinch points are formed when two rotating objects move together, and at least one of them moves in a circle, or one is stationary and the other one pulls in. These points can mangle or maim someone. They come in all shapes and sizes. They may be belts, pulleys, chains. They may be feed drives or feed rollers. Ingoing implements, pinch points, can be chains and sprockets, belts and pulleys. The PTO shaft, usually guarded, can also be a hazard. They can end up with wrap points. They're just rotating shafts. You could get cuffs or sleeves or pant legs or long hair, or even just a thread can get caught, a string from a hoodie, and pull you into it. So check all equipment for potential wrap points, and if possible, shield those that can be shielded. Things like nicks and rust and dried mud, dried manure, those can cause non-smooth surfaces that can grab you and pull you in. Shear points are created when the edges of two objects are moved together closely enough to cut a soft material. These can result in serious lacerations or even amputations. Stored energy hazards are present in pressurized systems such as hydraulics, compressed air, and springs. It's a sudden or unexpected pressurization or depressurization of these systems, and those can result in crushing injuries. But don't forget, gravity is also a stored energy. And this is a point here where you've got a stationary object and a moving object, and that stored energy can release and pinch you in the middle of that. So how do we prevent side rollovers? That's the most fatal type of accident. They can happen in less than a second. Once the tractor's center of gravity is outside the safe zone, there's nothing the operator can do. There's two types of tractor rollovers, sideways and rearward. To prevent these, drive at appropriate speeds. Rushing is not worth your life. Stay away from steep slopes, ditches, embankments. Keep front end loader and buckets and implements low and transport for turning. Drive forward down steep slopes and back up them rather than operating sideways against it. And slow down when pulling rear mounted equipment, just to help keep that center of gravity in the center. So rearward rollovers can be prevented. Keep the bucket and front end loaders low when they're pulling rear mounted loads. You might need to add front weight when raising heavy rear mounted equipment. Back up steep hills and drive forward down steep hills. Hitch loads only to the drawbar, never above the drawbar, because you change the center of gravity. Engage the clutch slowly and smoothly. Be ready to disengage power quickly if the front end begins to rise. Start forward motion slowly and change speed gradually. If a tractor becomes stuck, don't force it out. Try to back it out free. If that doesn't work, get another tractor to pull it out. Remember to attach that chain when you're pulling it out to the drawbar on the second tractor. So I told you we'd talk about roller protective structures and safe zones. So, in the unfortunate event of a rollover, those ROPS, the roller protective structures, they can save the life if the operator uses a secured and safely fastened seatbelt. ROPS create a safe zone for that operator and an overturned tractor. Seatbelt keeps the operator there in that zone. ROPS are equipped on all tractors built after October 25th, 1976. If it's earlier than that, and ROPS accessories are available, and many retro kits are available, they should be installed in tractors that are older than that 1976 model. If the tractor you operate cannot accommodate a ROPS, do not wear a seatbelt. Otherwise, you can be trapped with it and when the tractor rolls. So no ROPS, no seatbelt. The only time you should be using a tractor without ROPS would be a time that there's an overhead obstruction, like in orchards, vineyards, hop yards, inside farm buildings or greenhouses, inside dairy barns, scraping manure, scraping feed. It's imperative to operators be sure their surroundings and prevent rollovers. Those regulations allow ROPS to be down when that's a related use. But if you're going more than just a few hundred yards, that ROPS should really be put up. There were 2 fatalities last year in tractors where ROPS were not up and they should have been. So safe hitching to avoid these hazards, follow these points, never hitch to the axle or another high point, hitch the loads only to a drawbar and the manufacturer's recommended height. Keep your hitches as low as possible and always keep the hitch on the drawbar. This helps prevent a tractor flipping over backwards. When using 3-point hitch, add front weights as necessary to maintain stability and prevent steering problems. Use the proper safety clips and pins. There's times that you apply, you can see the picture that there's a drawbar pin. There's a keeper that goes on the bottom of that. Real important to have that keeper in there as well. Keep your chains tight, keep them to where if the pin did come out or shear, that at least the piece of equipment would stay behind the tractor. Remember to disengage the PTO when it's not in use. Use the PTO shield whenever equipment is in use. Don't wear loose clothing while operating a tractor because that loose clothing can catch on some part of the tractor and the moving parts. So falls are one of the most common sources of serious injuries across the country in machinery and equipment and tractors. To ensure that employees don't fall from tractors, only allow the amount of riders for the same number of seats. Don't allow extra riders. Any bump or quick turn can cause the unsecured person to fall under the moving tractor. Mounting and dismounting can be a source of falls. Employees should clean off all debris from their footwear and footholds, use the handholds, clean off the steps, face the equipment, use the handholds, and use a 3-point of contact. Always face the tractor. 3 points going in, 3 points coming down, always facing the tractor. Never jump from the equipment. Always shut off the engine and set the brake before dismounting and then step down. So there's always a risk of fire and explosion when refueling. So to mitigate that, never refuel the tractor while the engine's running or hot. Never smoke or use other ignition sources near the fuel. Static electricity can be a natural ignition source, and a spark from ignition system or hot exhaust could cause the fuel to ignite. If possible, use a grounding pin and ground the tractor out with a wire or by dropping metal mounted equipment so it touches the ground and reduce static electricity. Those tractors, most tractors have tires, and those tires are rubber and they insulate from grounding the equipment. So if you drop that piece of equipment that's mounted and it's metal, it'll ground the equipment and the tractor. Always refuel the tractor outside, store your fuels outside, and you should keep the fuel tanks at least 40 feet away from any buildings. Make sure there's no combustibles, weeds, other things that can cause ignition sources. Always carry a dry chemical fire extinguisher and a first aid kit. And tractors should have at least a 5-pound extinguisher, and operators should know where the kit and fire extinguishers are located. Additionally, never add water to a radiator while the engine's hot. Hot water can erupt and scald. Then be sure that good ventilation before starting the tractor engine. Exhaust gases contain carbon monoxide, which is odorless, colorless, and it's deadly. So let's review. There are several other hazards that can be present when using tractors on a public road. Make sure that the tractor has lamps and reflectors and a slow-moving vehicle emblem. The operators on public roads 1/2 hour after sunset to 1/2 hour before sunrise should ensure that the tractors has the necessary lights and reflectors required by state laws. It may need a pilot vehicle front and rear. Keep the tractor chemical free before entering the cab. Remove personal protective equipment worn while handling and mixing chemicals. If the cab's a type that will not protect a person during product application, it may be best to continue wearing the PPE. Remove contaminated soil and debris from shoes and boots before entering the cab. Keep the floor clean by sweeping or vacuuming, and wipe it down after operations. Remember that if you're wiping and cleaning equipment, make sure that the proper PPE is used as the product label if you're using pesticides. Clean the tractor's exterior and reduce that chemical exposure potential. Never grasp the steering wheel while wearing gloves that were used during handling or mixing chemicals. Clean the control knobs and steering wheel regularly with grease cutting solvents or cleaning agents. Never use the tractor inappropriately. Don't use it for a task that's not designed for. It's not a implement carrier. It's not a transport unit. It's not a remote power source. They're not recreational vehicles. They're not tow trucks or vehicles to run errands, and they should never be used for joyriding or doing things like herding cattle. When done working in the day, park the farm machinery in a safe place, disengage the PTO, lower equipment to the ground, turn off the engine, put the transmission into neutral or park, set the brakes and remove the key. Never leave the vehicle in gear. So again, summary, tractors, they've contributed immeasurably to farm production. They've helped it possible for farmers to feed not only themselves, but hundreds of others. And although today's tractors are the safest ever, they're still involved in many farm accidents. Over the years, manufacturers have added many safety features such as roller protective structures, seat belts, power takeoff shields, traveling lights, heated cabs, and all that safety equipment is great, but it can't replace a well-trained operator that's aware of the potential hazards of operating a farm tractor. To prevent rollovers, assess your work area, avoid ditches, embankments, and holes, turn slowly, keep the implements low, watch where you're going, keep the hitch low, wear your seatbelt, and engage your ROPS. Hitch only to the drawbar and the recommended hitch points. Don't use unguarded PTO implements, and set the brake for dismounting before dismounting. So here's our contact information. I am Jeff Lutz. I'm in the Kennewick area. Dominique Damien is in the Lacey area, and Luis Iziordia is in the Sunnyside, Lower Yakima Valley area. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here, and your time and efforts are appreciated. Thanks.
I can't end it.